are talking about the environment and the progress that we're making in taking care of it. We had double Hoven earlier. Now we're having double green. Double green because we're talking about electrical bacteria may help clean oil spills and curb methane emissions. A wispy microbe's influence over surroundings clears toxic sulfides and methane, which is what we're seeing here. This is so pretty though. Look at that. And it looks like maybe it's stars or something. It's microbes that are going to be cleaning up methane and oil spills. Yeah, let's read on. This is a good project that's going on. This was from July, so this has been a few months back. Yeah, the small motorboat anchored in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. Shrieks of wintering birds assault the vessel's 5 crew members, all clad in bright orange flotation suits. One of the crew slowly pulls a rope out of the water to retrieve a plastic tube about the length of a person's arm and filled with mud from the bottom of the bay. As the tube is hauled on board, the stench of rotten eggs fills the air. Chesapeake Bay mud is stinky, said Sarah Malkin, a biochemist at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science in Cambridge, who is on board the boat. The smell comes from the sulfuric chemicals called sulfides within the mud. They're quite toxic, Malkin explains. Malkin and her team ventured out onto the bay every couple of months to sample the foul muck and track the abundance of squiggling mud dwellers called cable bacteria. The microbes are living wires. Their thread-like bodies, thinner than a human hair, can channel electricity. Cable bacteria use the power to chemically rewire their surroundings. While some microbes in the area produce sulfides, the cable bacteria remove those chemicals and help prevent them from moving up into the water column. By managing sulfides, cable bacteria may protect fish, crustaceans, and other aquatic organisms from the toxic nightmare, says Philip Meisman, a biogeochemist at the University of Antwerp in Belgium. They're kind of like guardian angels in the coastal ecosystem. Now, scientists are studying how these living electrical filaments might do good in other ways. Laboratory experiments show that cable bacteria can support other microbes that consume crude oil. So researchers are investigating how to encourage the bacteria to grow and help clean up oil spills. What's more, researchers have shown that cable bacteria could help slash emissions of potent greenhouse gas methane into the atmosphere. There's plenty of evidence that cable bacteria exert a strong influence over their microbial neighbors, Meisman says. The next step, he says, is to figure out how to channel that influence for the greater good. Electric life. Under the microscope, cable bacteria resemble long sausage links. Their multicellular bodies can grow up to 5 centimeters long. Embedded in the envelope of each cell are parallel wires of conductive proteins, which the bacteria use to channel electrons. According to Meisman, the wires are more conductive than the semiconductors found in electronics. About a decade ago, a team of scientists first discovered cable bacteria in sediment collected from the bottom of Denmark's Aarhus Bay. Since then, cable bacteria have been found on at least 4 continents, in streams, lakes, estuaries, and coastal environments. Name me a country and I'll show you where cable bacteria are, Meisman says. Most often, cable bacteria nestle shallow in the sediment, where with one end positioned near the surface where there is oxygen, the other end plugged into deeper sulfide-rich zone, using their filamentous bodies as electrical conduits. Cable bacteria snatch electrons from sulfide on one end and offload them to oxygen, an eager electron acceptor. At the other, says Nicole Gerdings, a biochemist at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, or Utrecht University, sorry. Similar to how batteries charge and release energy by transferring electrons between an anode and a cathode. Cable bacteria power themselves by channeling electrons. She says the electron transport gives cable bacteria energy. This unique lifestyle allows cable bacteria to survive in environments that many organisms could not endure. The toxic firewall. In 2015, Malkin, Meisman, and colleagues reported that the cable bacteria may help to counteract the onset of euxenia, a fatal buildup of sulfide and oxygen, starved bodies of water. Euxenia can trigger mass die-offs of fish, crustaceans, and other aquatic life. The lethal phenomena can occur after fertilizers or sewage are washed into the sea or lakes. That flow of nutrients can trigger algal blooms. I guess that's how you'd say it, algal blooms. I guess algae is the proper way to say algae. I say algae because I grew up with a swimming pool, and my dad has this thick southern accent. Algae. When those nutrients are depleted, the bloom dies, and large quantities of organic matter sink and accumulate on the sediment. Microbes then decompose the dead material, devouring as much of the oxygen in the surrounding water in the process. When oxygen levels become critically low, sulfides may begin to leak from the sediment into the water, giving rise to euxenia. While studying cable bacteria in brackish bodies of water in the Netherlands, Malkin and colleagues discovered a thin layer of rust coating the lake bottom. As the cable bacteria pulled electrons from sulfides, converting the noxious chemical into less harmful sulfates, the water within the sediment became more acidic, which dissolved some of the minerals containing iron. The now mobile iron percolated upward in the sediment until it interacted with the oxygen to form rust. Thin layers of rust could capture sulfides that would otherwise flow into the water, acting as a firewall that could delay euxenia for over a month, or even prevent it altogether, the researchers reported. Even when the cable bacteria population dropped, the rust layer persisted, protecting other aquatic creatures from sulfide exposure. The rust may explain why, even though instances of nutrient pollution, algal blooms, and oxygen depletion are relatively common, reports of euxenia are rare. Oil cleanup. Some researchers are trying to harness the bacteria's electrical abilities to tackle another devastating threat to coastal ecosystems: oil spills. This is what brought me here. So this is why Bumblebee is here. When an oil spill happens in a body of water, booms, skimmers, or sorbients are often deployed to limit the spread of hydrocarbons on the surface. But oil may also wash onto beaches, mix with sediments in shallow water, and aggregate onto sinking particles of organic debris, hitching a ride to the seafloor. Cleaning up oil at the bottom of the sea is a difficult job, says Ungo Marzocchi, a biogeochemist at Aarhus University in Denmark, I am not aware of a very effective way to remove hydrocarbons from the seafloor, he says. In inland freshwater systems, what is generally done is to dig out the sediment, he says, an expensive strategy that would be even more costly at sea. Yeah, actually going out there and dredging the top layer of the sediment off. Let's watch them. You want to watch them? Let's see what they do. Cable bacteria moving towards oxygen. All right, hey, there's me. There's us live right now. Haha, it's Inception. All right, electric cable bacteria, white filaments emerge from the seafloor sediment at the bottom, stretching their bodies to reach a zone of oxygen in the water. The stringy organism uses the oxygen to offload electrons they've harvested from harmful sulfides found in the sediment. As sulfide concentrations go down, the water becomes more habitable to microbes that can clean up oil spills. Some soil-dwelling microorganisms can use hydrocarbons to fuel their metabolism, and researchers have been studying how some of these oil burners might assist in the cleanup of contaminated sediment. But as they break down hydrocarbons, the microbes generate those concerning sulfides, which are detrimental to the microbe's own survival. Marzocchi says, in other words, the microbes can help clean up the oil for only so long before they're overwhelmed by their own toxic waste. Cable bacteria might be just the solution, Marzocchi thought. In 2016, researchers reported finding evidence of electrical microbes in a tar oil contaminated groundwater aquifer in Germany. Knowing the cable bacteria could occupy sediment contaminated with hydrocarbons, Marzocchi and colleagues reasoned that these bacteria might be able to assist oil burning microbes in accelerating oil cleanup. The researchers filled several containers with oil contaminated sediment from Aarhus Bay, which contain naturally occurring oil-eating bacteria. The group then injected a few containers with cable bacteria and monitored the degree of hydrocarbon degradation in all the containers over 7 weeks. By the end of the test, concentrations of alkanes, a type of hydrocarbon in the sediment with the cable bacteria, had dropped to 0.125 milligrams per gram of sediment to 0.086 milligrams per gram, a 31% drop. That's 23 percentage points more than the 9% increase in the controlled sample. Cable bacteria helped accelerate the metabolic activity of their oil-eating neighbors by converting the toxic sulfides into sulfates. The sulfates didn't harm the oil-eating microbe. In fact, they used the chemicals as fuel. So to the rescue, oil-eating microbes can clean up the seafloor sediment contaminated by oil spills, but those microbes generate toxic sulfides as waste, which hampers the microbe's activity. Cable bacteria may help by harvesting electrons from the sulfides, converting them into sulfates, which the oil-eating microbes can use as fuel. Meanwhile, the cable bacteria channel the electrons up their body and pass them off to oxygen in the sediment. This transport powers the cable bacteria's metabolism. So this is pretty cool stuff. Yeah. How much more we got here? Okay. We should have enough time to finish this. We still got 15 minutes. The researchers are now trying to develop methods to promote cable bacteria growing in the field and see if it's possible to enhance their effects on oil degradation. One catch is that the oil contaminated sediment Oxygen is quickly used up by the microbes that break down the hydrocarbons. That's a problem since cable bacteria need access to oxygen. Salts that slowly release oxygen or nitrates, which cable bacteria can use in place of oxygen, might help spur the electrical organism's growth at oil spills. But more work is needed to identify the right chemical components and dosage, Marcosi says. Meanwhile, scientists are investigating how cable bacteria might help reduce emissions in another hydrocarbon, one that accumulates in the sky. Methane at the roots. Colorless, odorless methane is the simplest hydrocarbon. It consists of a single carbon atom attached to a quartet of hydrogen atoms. At its potent greenhouse gas, and it's a potent greenhouse gas, more than 25 times as effective as trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. One major source of methane is rice paddies. During the growing season, rice farmers typically flood their fields to help stave off weeds and pests. Methane producing microbes, aptly named methogens, thrive in the waterlogged soil. Paddy dwelling methogens are so prolific that rice fields are estimated to generate about 11% of all human induced methane emissions. But cable bacteria like paddies too. In 2019, Vincent Scholz, a microbiologist at Aarhus University, and colleagues reported that cable bacteria could flourish among the roots of rice plants and several other aquatic plant species. The experiments, in an experiment, pots of rice plants grown in soil with cable bacteria developed orange layers of rust and emitted less methane than pots without cable bacteria. That discovery inspired the researchers to investigate how the bacteria interacts with methogens in the soil that grow rice. The team grew its own rice plants, some potted in soil with cable bacteria and some without, and monitored the methane emissions. To the researchers' surprise, adding cable bacteria reduced rice soil methane emissions by 93%. That's a lot, 93%. Keep that in mind. Yeah. In the process of removing electrons from sulfides, the bacteria generated sulfates, which other microbes can use as fuel. Those sulfate-consuming microbes outcompeted methogen for nutrients such as hydrogen and acetate in the rice soils. The researchers found the results were quite amazing, Scholz says, though the effectiveness of the electrical microbes in real rice fields has yet to be tested. There are signs that cable bacteria are already plugged into real rice paddy soil after analyzing genetic data collected from rice paddies in the United States, India, Vietnam, and China. Scholz and colleagues reported in 2021 the presence of cable bacteria at sites in all 4 countries. Scholz is in North California this summer studying how cable bacteria live in rice fields and whether they're already impacting methane emissions. He is also exploring ways to introduce cable bacteria to rice fields where they do not yet exist or enhance the microbes' numbers in fields where they do. There is still much to discover about how these wispy electrical conductors influence our world, Malkin says. Back in the Chesapeake Bay, she and colleagues have found that cable bacteria tend to flourish in the spring and a surge that has also been observed in the Netherlands. The findings add to a growing body of work that suggests cable bacteria are opportunistic organisms that interact with their environment in similar ways all around the world. If cable bacteria are already hard at work across the planet, then a bit of coaxing from researchers may be all it takes to turn the mud-dwelling creatures into the most helpful neighbors in the living that a living thing could ask for. So, yeah, that was about these cable bacteria that generate and process electrons as part of their biology, and how we're going to be using those in the future. I would keep an eye on these organisms to see what actually comes of this. But yes, that was our dive into a little bit of hive science today.